Welcome. I'll just say welcome to everybody to Word on the Street Live. This is our weekly time, Wednesday at 4 p.m. We actually are live, in fact, this week. As Ilan was mentioning, I'm up here in Martha's Vineyard, and Ilan is coming to you from Atlanta. And we are about to make a major transition, Ilan, in Word on the Street, which I started about 10 months ago as a personal Substack, as a space where I could just opine on the issues of the day and give me a little bit of an outlet for my personal views. But it's really caught on, and Substack as a whole is just exploding as a place for engagement, longer form writing for these kinds of videos. It's an alternative media outlet, really. And so we are going to be turning the Word on the Street Substack into a media information hub for J Street. And so for those of you who are Substack users, I hope that you will check out our organizational Substack home now on Word on the Street. And we will be putting all of our products up there. Ilan is working very closely with our policy center, and our policy fellows are now all on Substack. We'll be posting there lots of video content. I'm very excited about this, Ilan.
Yeah, me too. No, we'll also have like my column, which has been on dialogue and dissonance. I'll still keep that going, but I'll post everything first on Word on the Street. So we'll integrate our two. We did that today, actually. I posted my first piece on Word of the Street today. We're still in the dry run phase for a few more days as we work out the kinks. But, and then from there, all of our policy memo briefings, which folks probably get, and trying to think also other cool stuff from other J Street. Nadav Tamir, our Israel director, is just a monster.
He doesn't stop, right? He just keeps on writing. It's amazing. So we'll be posting his stuff. Lots of good stuff will be available. This will really be, I think, an outlet for those of us in the progressive Zionist, liberal Zionist camp who are, pro-Israel, pro-peace, pro-democracy. There is so much media content out there that is really far left, really far right. I feel like we will be filling a real important space if we can build out Word on the Street to be a vibrant media home and information hub for this movement. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. And I think what we'll do today, we can get started in terms of our actual discussion today. We'll talk about a few different things. I think we'll start with just what is happening in Gaza. The latest, we had this terrible incident with a hospital bombing over the past couple of days, as well as the IPC declaration on famine recently. Things going on in Israel. A meeting today with Trump to talk about Gaza Day After. And then we'll also talk about what's happening in Washington. This is going to be more old school, like hack and the wonk, right? Like I'll be playing the role of the wonk, and Jeremy will be playing the role of the hack. We'll talk about what's happening in Washington too. Congressional letters, DNC resolutions, other potential legislation coming down the pike, and we'll go from there. So should be looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Word on the Street Live, 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. And here we go. So, Ilan, you mentioned some of the things that I want to focus on with you.
Yeah.
Specifically, this week, we had this particular incident yet again at a hospital, which is just a constant theme because it's some of the few major structures that are left standing. And of course, as we know, Hamas has used hospitals as a safe space underground, as well as using the space. So tell us a little bit about what exactly happened this week, because I understand that 6 journalists, AP, Reuters affiliated journalists, were at the location. So what exactly happened, and what was the IDF's explanation of what went on?
Look, you had 6 I think it was 5 or 6 journalists at the location who were killed. 20 people killed total overall in this hospital. And then Netanyahu comes out and says this was a tragic mishap. But then the IDF afterwards says they saw a Hamas camera and they were concerned about security. And so that's why they fired at the hospital. To me, look, this is what this pull back. And I just posted something on this.
You just posted, right? Yeah.
And I have strong views. Look, I've worked at the Pentagon. I understand how political and policy guidance translates into actions on the ground by the military. And what you have is an Israeli government who is saying, focus on killing the Hamas operative. The key is we got to have absolute victory, we're going to kill our way out of this war. no plans for the day after. We'll talk about that later. No realistic plans for how you actually get out of this. We're just like, the whole point is like destroy, destroy, destroy through military use. And we're going for total victory. And when that's the guidance that the military gets from the political leadership, then the military is like, okay, they turn and they're like, how do we build our plan accordingly? And then you start to do things like make decisions. Are we going to pursue a strike that essentially focuses on killing this mid-level Hamas operative? Or are we concerned that killing this mid-level Hamas operative, if it also kills 5 journalists, for example, is actually going to be a catastrophic mistake for us? And not only is it morally problematic and legally problematic, but it actually hurts us in the international community, right? And if you had a government that was saying, our plan is to defeat Hamas, but also care about what the rest of the world thinks and also respect human rights and also respect Palestinian lives, then that would translate down when you get to the military decision of the operator on the ground is like, oh, my guidance says, like, don't shoot at this hospital, right? But if the guidance and the words coming from the political leadership are total victory, kill, 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 no strategy, like every Hamas operative must go, you end up with these outcomes.
And it seems to me that Ayel Zamir, who is the relatively new still chief of staff of the IDF, who was considered to be a relative hardliner and aligned more with the approach of this government, it seems that he is relatively public with his disagreement with this. I mean, I'm reading about him appearing all over the country, and he's doing public statements that would indicate his disagreement with this. And what's your read on what he's been doing and saying?
I mean, the most interesting thing he said is there's a hostage deal on the table that we should essentially take. That's been reported. It's not like he's saying it on the record, but he's going around and talking in enough off record and on background places that it's seeping out. And it's not surprising because literally it's what you hear from so many Israeli security officials, both retired and serving. And you've been hearing it for 2 years from the negotiating team and Shabak officials and others. And it all goes back to the fact that like Netanyahu doesn't want to end this war because of the politics for him. And everybody who's looking at it from a security perspective is basically saying there's nothing else to be accomplished by continuing this war. Like Hamas has been degraded as it can be militarily. We need a political and security plan to actually displace and remove Hamas. We need to get the hostages home. That's what we need to do. So it is interesting. Like you would not see, I think, this level of public disagreement coming out of the military in the United States usually. So I'm finding it like pretty fascinating but also not at all.
It's also a little out of the ordinary for Israel too, right? I mean, not just the United States, but from what I can see in over the course of the decades of watching this, this is an extremely unusual situation in Israel itself.
Yes. I think that is, it says something about where the country is. And actually, look, we had some similar stuff during the first Trump administration where you'd have Mark Milley on occasion let loose in ways to demonstrate discomfort, right? And so that's what this. That's actually, I finished my piece and I wrote, and this is, I think, where it all comes down to the military. There is this command between the political and the military, right? But if you have Israelis like to talk about, the IDF being the most moral military in the world. That's the sort of an Israeli perspective. You can debate and argue that, but I think what you can't debate and argue is like when you have a political leadership that is immoral, that those orders translate down and they lead to immoral actions like across the board. And then you're stuck as a military officer, if you're respecting democracy, you listen to your politically elected civilian leaders. Civilian control of the military is really important. At the same time, at least in the United States, military officers are allowed to disobey what they believe are assessed to be illegal orders.
Right.
And so, but every one of those is a really hard decision, and you constantly have to walk that line because you're not the elected official. You want a democracy, and I think that's why you're seeing Zamir try to walk this very fine, complicated line.
So let's shift a little bit from the conduct of the war militarily to the humanitarian situation. And It was, I think, just within the last week that the UN body that is responsible for determining the status of famine, hunger internationally, the IPC, it did in fact say that in Gaza City we have reached now a famine, and the reports every day out of Gaza are that there are numerous children every single day, which is the first group in any society when there is a famine. The first group that feels the effects is children. Every day, numerous children are dying. I mean, it really is a terrible situation. What are you hearing about the efforts to try to increase the amount of aid that is getting in? There was a promise that we're going to be more distribution sites open, promises about more trucks. It's also becoming a highly propagandized point with lots of selfie videos from security contractors now, standing in front of trucks that have a lot of stuff on it, but it doesn't tell you anything about the larger scope. So what are you hearing?
So, well, look, I think a few things. First, there is a recognition, I think, by the Israeli government at this point that they have a problem on their hands, belatedly, finally. And you had these moments before where the pressure, international pressure on Israel gets too much, and the Israeli government finally recognizes it and lets in more aid. And there has been a change in behavior over the last couple weeks where more aid is getting in for sure. It feels like that. And talking to folks, and prices are going down. So that is all good. At the same time, it takes time. You don't unstock I think I heard somebody say you don't unstock a supermarket for 3 months, and then in a matter of a few days, if you want to restock the supermarket, you can't just go back to business as usual. You got to surge in massive ways. I don't think that is actually what is happening. And so it takes time. And one of the dangers is once you actually hit famine type levels, uh, it becomes really hard to unscrew. It becomes really, really hard to walk back from it, and there's so much damage that is gone. So I think that's part of what we're now facing. I also have to say, I hate the whole debate around the word famine is becoming like the debate around the word, genocide, which is a whole, other topic. And that it's like people are just getting fixated on the word. So the IPC is the gold standard, right? And it puts out this report. And the first thing the Israeli government does is pages and pages and things about like why this is unfair and this is a double standard and this is a lie. Like for example, they put out there that actually you've changed the standards from 30% to 15%, and now you're measuring based on instead of measuring based on height and width of people, you're measuring based on arm circumference. And it's like, no, that's always been one of a number of standards. So that was just like a lie. But then the part that really bugged me the most was in their very long, comprehensive paper. At one point, the Israelis foreign ministry goes through all the numbers and tries to demonstrate that actually acute malnutrition is only at 13%, not at 15%, and therefore it's not a famine and should not be called a famine. And my answer to that is the same answer that we have this genocide debate and discussion, which is, who cares if it's 13% or 15%?
Right, can we just say
it is
disgusting? And the bottom line is, I don't want to be debating percentages of arm circumference. This is disgusting, right? I mean, the idea that a first world country with one of the highest GDPs and per capita incomes, is sitting across the border from a place where there isn't enough food for children and they're dying of starvation. This is just immoral. It is wrong. Put aside the strategic interests of the state of Israel, which, are not being served by having this be the image of Israel. But this is against our Jewish values. This is against American interests. This is wrong in terms of just humanity and morals. And I just can't believe that this is the debate and that there's a sense somewhere in the Israeli foreign ministry that it's a good idea to put out these kinds of talking points to rebut this. It's just awful. Let me ask you another question along the lines of
other just last thing on this, Jeremy, because it makes me really mad. It's also the best way to defeat Hamas, because the guys with the guns, I will say this till I'm blue in the face. The guys with the guns will always eat. The key is to make it that food cannot be a source of power. Food cannot be a source of money. And the way you do that is by flooding the zone and turning it into a commodity instead of a scarce resource. And so on top of everything else, it's empowering Hamas. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no. So I was going to ask you. I have noticed over the course of the last few weeks, it's about 7 months now since the end, a little bit more since the end of the Biden administration into the Trump administration, and I'm seeing over the last few weeks the beginnings of the public reckoning and the public debate of ex-Biden administration folks. When you've seen op-eds from the Secretary of State, and you've seen lengthy periods from lengthy analyses in the Atlantic from national security officials. You're seeing a whole range of people. An interview in the New Yorker with the ambassador Jack Lew. I'm curious your take. You know all the players. You were in the room. There seems to be a desire from some officials to say, well, at least we're not as bad as Trump is, or it wasn't so bad under us, and now look, so we weren't so bad. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a way to think about this and the way to write about it and to wrestle honestly and for real with what we did and what we might have done right and what we might have done wrong. It starts for me with an understanding that at the end of the day, we might have, I think everybody I worked with in the administration, I genuinely believe was well meaning and was trying to do the best they could. And these situations were really, really, really hard. So that's the position I come from. I don't think there was any malicious intent. I also think we made a lot of mistakes and things we could have done better. Right. And like really, some really pretty catastrophic mistakes. I've written about some of them. And I really think it's important to wrestle honestly with that instead of just come out defensively, right? And there's a contrast in the pieces. Some of them like really wrestle with some of the things and acknowledge, we should have done a lot better on aid. We tried really hard, and also, frankly, we would never have let this total cutoff that happened under Trump happen. We would not have ever supported the GHF. So yeah, we are better than Trump. But it's not enough to just say we're better than Trump.
Really low bar.
Yeah,
really
you have to
bar.
also, you can even say we tried really hard, but I think I'd really like to see officials also say, and also like, here's what we could have done better, or here are mistakes we made, and because, that's the kind of honest wrestling I would like to see. And you're seeing it in some of these pieces, and you're really not seeing it in others. I have my own personal views on some of these different pieces. I'm going to share with these folks I know personally.
Exactly. We're not going to name names here,
right? So these are people I've worked with and have a lot of respect for. But in some cases, I really disagree with them, or I wish they would have done it differently. In other words, cases, I really think they nailed it.
By the way, one piece that I would highlight for people is John Finer's piece in the Atlantic, because it's a really thorough review of what's happening on the West Bank. And we're going to, at some point, we'll have John on and we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail. But if folks haven't seen it, John went with the two of us and with a large group to the West Bank. We even did one of our Word on the Street lives from Jerusalem at 11 p.m. Jerusalem time on that trip. And John's written it up. So if you want to get a sense of what we saw and just how terrible the situation is on the West Bank, and we can't lose sight of that as we're focused so heavily as we must be on Gaza. So anything new on ceasefire talks? Are you hearing anything at all?
I mean, not really. I keep hoping we do have this, meeting today.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what meeting. Tell us a little bit.
There's a meeting at the White House today. It sounds like Tony Blair is there and Jared Kushner, which is a little interesting, about planning for day after in Gaza, which I think I think it's good if they're talking about that. But, as I think you and I have talked about, and I think I've shared in this, I was writing and talking about planning for day after Gaza in October of 23, because the day after Gaza is like literally the day that the war is still going on, right? And I think I don't have a lot of confidence in the Trump administration and this Israeli government to be able to pull any of these things off.
Think?
No, but at least they're talking to the president.
Yeah.
I mean, look, these day after discussions, they are so complicated and they are so hard. There is not a world where I think Donald Trump really has patience for understanding any of this or doing anything sophisticated on any of this. I mean, this is ultimately like this. I mean, his lack of patience and attention is also one of the reasons why I don't think he's really going after Bibi the way he should,
And they disbanded the group at State that was working on day after planning, right? I see that somewhere in one of the group chats that you and I are on. I think I saw that they've disbanded the whole group, right?
Yes. That was, that was going for a year and a half. But I mean, depressingly, it feels like I mean, what's the point of day after planning as long as Bibi Netanyahu is in government? Because it really feels like he's gonna,
Ooh,
keep.
good segue.
Yeah.
Good segue to Israeli politics and what's
Mhm.
happening in Israel, because
Yeah.
it does feel like we're now inching our way back towards the Knesset coming back in a month or so, and I'm definitely hearing rumbles that the Haredi draft uh,
Mm.
issue is still unsettled and still poses a real threat to the coalition. If it were to result in a vote of no confidence in October, that means elections could be as early as January. But we're
Yeah.
certainly looking at elections coming up, and the protest movement. It also feels like has gotten a new burst of energy as a result of the decision by the cabinet to go into Gaza City, and you've seen the largest days of protest and the largest work stoppages. Tell us a little bit about what your sense is of what's happening in Israel right now.
Oh, yeah, I think the public is fed up, right? I mean, we're talking about 75% support for ending the war and getting the hostages out, right? And we've been there for a while. We should be transparent and clear about this. It's not that there's a ton of love for Palestinians or people are ready to go jumping into the two-state solution tomorrow, but they are very much had it with. They're just seeing their sons and daughters and fathers and husbands go off to war again and again and again. And it's like, what is this for? And they want the hostages out, and they want accountability for October 7th. And I think that pressure is really building. It's kind of similar. I feels to me like where we were in the Iraq War after 9/11. Like beginning, everybody just was really traumatized, and we made some very bad decisions. But eventually, the public comes around, and that's where we've gotten to now. We're in that point where the public is coming around. And I think that probably the government will collapse sometime between October and March, right? When they come back in October, after the Hagim, after the high holidays, and then until March when you
Somewhere
have
in
the
there.
budget passed. Yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere in there it passed, and 3 months later you have elections. I have a question for you, Jeremy, while we're talking
All
about
right.
this. Did you see what Netanyahu said today? Or maybe it was last night
Oh,
about.
the October 7th would never have happened if Trump had been president, right?
Yeah, I mean, boggles the mind. Boggles the mind. The man is trying to basically pass responsibility for October 7th from himself to Joe Biden. And I thought the response from Yair Lapid was really, really excellent, which was basically, A, this is nuts, you know? This is this is your responsibility. This is your fault. You are the prime minister of Israel. But B, Yair Lapid also pointed this out. What are you trying to do? Destroy our relationship with Democrats and American Jews forever by blaming Joe Biden for October 7th, which I 100% agree with. I mean, it's very rare that I get angry at surprise angry at Netanyahu anymore. But this, for me, even by his standards, felt like beyond the pale. I don't know what you thought.
Well, I mean, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is the single worst thing that has happened to the Jewish people as a Jewish leader in my lifetime. And, I have to really stretch back into history to think of somebody who's done more damage to the Jewish people and to the nation of Israel, not just the state of Israel. So nothing surprises me. And I probably didn't have that same surprise reaction because nothing surprises me about him at this point.
Yeah, no. But while we're talking politics, Jeremy, we should transition to American politics.
Time for the hack.
Yeah. Yes, time for the hack. So, tell me the wonk, as is always the case, talks too long. Because that is what the wonk does. The hack is always much more
Talking
succinct.
points.
Talking,
Right. You
it
got
hits
to
the
have your
3 points.
soundbite. Exactly.
Exactly. So tell me what is we had two letters that we worked on this week on the Hill that I think got a lot of attention. Well, didn't get enough attention, but got a lot of support in
Right.
Congress. And I want
Yeah,
tell
just
tell
just to
everybody about that.
give people a feel for this. We are in the depths of August in Washington D.C., so nobody is in town. I mean, Congress is itself on recess, but all of the staff isn't here, and many of the members of Congress are out of touch because they do take a few days here and there where they do unwind, and this is that time when they are away. And so, it's been my experience that if you try to launch any form of legislative initiative in the depths of late August, you are really asking for zero response. And these two letters, one of which was focused on the just outrageous decision by Marco Rubio to take the bait from Laura Loomer and say that they're going to stop giving medical visas to Palestinian children who are coming into the United States to get life-saving medical treatment. And those visas are now going to be denied. And just to be clear, anybody who's coming into the United States on a medical visa has cleared Israeli security, right? And that is really, really hard to do. So everybody who is coming here is 100% certified clean, not a security risk. And Laura Loomer picks up that this is happening. And the next thing you know, she's in the president's cell phone. And the next thing you know after that, Marco Rubio is saying we're no longer letting these kids in. So there is a letter that Debbie Dingell and Kim Schreier from Washington. Debbie Dingell's a member of Congress from Michigan, Kim Schreier from Washington State, and they led. And I think they started circulating the letter to Marco Rubio on Thursday, and it paralleled a letter from Brittany Pedersen, who's a member of Congress from Colorado, and Ayanna Pressley from Boston. Their letter was about baby formula and the fact that baby formula was not part of the packages that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is giving out. And obviously, in a moment of famine with young kids at the greatest risk, baby formula is absolutely essential. And Presley Pedersen is, I believe, either a nurse practitioner or a pediatrician, but a medical professional. And they led these two letters to Marco Rubio to say these policies are inhumane, they're insane, and we are at fault, right? This is an American policy, and American money is going to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And 143 members of Congress, that is over 2/3 of the Democrats, signed on to the Gaza visa letter in 4 days over a weekend in late August. And the other 60 members just probably couldn't be reached. I mean, we were working the phones all weekend. There were a lot of folks who were on vacation with their family. We couldn't reach them. The other letter got about 103 signatures, but it just shows the level of energy and desire to do something and take action on these issues within the Democratic Party in Washington right now, even in the depths of August. So I was really impressed and amazed by that particular pair of letters.
Yeah, and I should say, especially the Dingell Schreiber one, really had people from across the Democratic Party, all stripes, from the far progressives to very much the centrists and everybody in between, signing on to this letter, which I found particularly heartening.
Yeah.
So, but tell us about beyond these two letters, we have some legislation coming up too.
Right.
Tell us what September's looking like. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the other thing that is out there's two big issues I would flag for people besides, obviously, the ongoing humanitarian questions and who gets medical treatment, who gets baby formula, those set of issues. There's the question of West Bank violence. There's a bill in Congress that has been introduced now in the Senate, actually a pair of bills that say basically the exact same thing, the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, and it pairs with a House piece of legislation that would codify the Biden era sanctions. And I think there is growing impatience in Congress and in the Democratic Party over the lack of any Israeli effort to hold the perpetrators of some of the worst violence. I mean, every single day, I can't believe, day after day after day, somebody that we know, is getting shot or their village is getting attacked, and then the Israeli army and the police are just not doing anything. And the settlers are armed with our own rifles, right, that we have provided. And I think that there's growing desire on a couple of fronts. One is to make sure that we are able to sanction these settlers and the financing and the organizations that are behind those settlers and the violence. And the other, I think, is going to be more and more focus on what are the restrictions on the arms that we are sending to Israel. And so I think you're going to see more statements like Adam Smith, who's the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee yesterday, saying, enough with arms shipments related to some of the worst violations. And I think you're going to see more and more support in the Democratic Party for real restrictions and real limitations and just the enforcement of American law.
Yeah.
So these are things to keep an eye on. The other thing is recognition of the state of Palestine, because we're coming up to the UN and around the UNGA, the General Assembly in mid-September. The French and the Saudis are going to lead some form of international gathering that's going to give a platform for a number of countries to formally announce their recognition of the state of Palestine. And Congressman Ro Khanna, who we had on last week, is leading the letter that we talked about in support of American recognition of Palestine. So these are all pieces that I think in the next month are going to come up. Settler violence, more and more language about arms restrictions, and also the recognition of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, and I should say just on the settler violence piece in particular, because you and I were in Khair last month, the aftermath of the killing of Bodeh Hassalin. We now had, we have a delegation out there right now, and they were just out in the southern Hebron Hills today, and there's basically new caravans. These kind of it's basically like a trailer homes just being dropped in the middle of, right on top of Palestinian land, right near the Palestinian village, just literally showed up yesterday. And this is happening every day. The violence, it's not just violence, it's violence combined with a strategic intent to actually move people out, intimidate them, get them out, clear them out of areas. There's a whole operation behind it, and so it really is important to target that. And the sanctions really were having an effect on these people before. One I think final thing we should talk about, Jeremy, in terms of what's happening now, maybe the most hacky of all the hacky things, which is the DNC resolutions that we saw. We saw 2 DNC resolutions come up for a vote yesterday, or at least and quite a kerfuffle around all these things that are related to Israel-Palestine. And tell people first what happened.
So, yeah, I mean, I saw there was a question in the chat about that from Ronnie. And I also just want to note, I mean, I've been in touch with one of our followers named Jill, who's asking a question which I want to make sure we get to, which is related to how do you keep the aid out of Hamas's hands? Because I want to really emphasize that as critical as we are of Israel and as critical as we are of the Trump administration and of the Biden administration over the failures on all of this, one can't leave out of the discussion the role of Hamas. And I do want to make sure that that's really clear. And one of the most important things in the aid distribution is having a system that actually secures the trucks and secures the aid so that armed gangs and armed thugs, whether they're Hamas or other criminal elements, are not able to get to the aid and take it before it can get to the distribution centers. And that's one of the main reasons why it sits just inside the gate, where everybody says, well, why is all the aid sitting there? It's because there isn't the deconfliction, there isn't the coordination between the IDF and the UN and the humanitarian agencies, whether it's World Central Kitchen or it's a UN outfit or whatever the group is. So I just want to make sure that it really is clear that keeping this aid out of Hamas's hands has to be a key priority in all this. You were involved in this.
Yeah, well, I can explain this a little bit. There's 2 things. One, in terms of the deconfliction, this again is that question of the Israeli military the night before will send a notice to a humanitarian agency. There will be a route open. Take this route, take this safe route, and sometimes they choose better routes and less better routes. Then in the morning, the UN agency might get suddenly a notification that says, route closed, try again a different day. How often that happens is very important. And the question is, if I see one mid-level Hamas operative, am I going to stop the route and go after the mid-level Hamas operative, or am I going to let the food go? And that again goes back to the question of strategy. And I think Israel has erred far too much on let's try to take out every Hamas operative at the expense of food. But the other thing about this is, again, this goes back to flooding the zone. People with guns will get food. There is no stopping that in Gaza. So the question with Hamas is less about how do we stop Hamas from getting any food? How do we make that food not worthless, but essentially not as valuable as gold, right?
Right.
The way you do that is you flood the zone. So if everybody has food, Hamas has a lot of food too. You know what? They can't use that to make a lot of money because prices are low, and they can't use that to say, only get food from us and nobody else. So the key is overwhelm the system with food. Hamas can't possibly steal all of it if you're bringing that much in. and they don't have the capacity to do that, then you lower prices and you don't let them use, it's not that you're trying to starve them, you're trying to not let them use food as power. That's the key. And you do that by making food not valuable. Sorry, but now let's go back to
Right. So back
the
to the
DNC.
DNC. Yes, exactly. So I think one of the storylines that reporters and the media love to pick up on, and I just, it seemed like I'm reading more about that than about some of the substantive issues, is this divide, quote unquote, in the Democratic Party over Israel. The DNC had a meeting in Minneapolis this week with its sort of the members of the DNC. It's about 400 people that are officially part of the DNC, the Democratic National Party's governing body. And they do pass resolutions from time to time on issues of substance. And in a resolution was introduced by one of the younger delegates, I think affiliated with the Young Democrats from Florida, which would have called for an arms embargo and specifically did call out genocide and specifically did not call out Hamas, and was a very one-sided resolution that I think reflects where a percentage of very progressive activists are. I think there's a bit of a generational divide. I think it's also where some of the more younger parts of the Democratic left-wing base might be. And in response to that, Ken Martin, who's the chair of the DNC, drafted his own resolution, which was a relatively innocuous, balanced resolution. It supported the concept of two states, and it did, in fact, call out both Hamas and the hostage taking, as well as Israel and the humanitarian crisis. It seemed to me to be close enough to a balanced resolution. And his resolution actually was the other one was voted down. His was up for consideration, and he pulled it at the last minute. And he formed a task force or a committee of some kind to bring the people together from both camps who were in favor of the dueling resolutions. I think that this is a non-story. What 400 party activists are doing in Minneapolis is much less important than what's happening here in Washington, D.C. in terms of Democrats in Congress and the coalescing that I think you are seeing around a position in the Democratic Party, which I think we can define as being a J Street aligned position, which is a support for Israel and its security and its defense, and an absolute opposition to what this war has become, and the need for an end now to the war, the release of the hostages, a surge of aid, and a day after plan that leads towards a Palestinian state and normalizes Israel's relations with its neighbors. And, I think there is a very wide consensus within the Democratic Party that aid cannot be a blank check anymore, that, the United States can't just be providing diplomatic immunity and cover for Israel from everything that it's doing. And yet we also are a friend of the state and the people of Israel, and we want to make sure that it's able to resist threats from Iran and from other. The Houthis continue to fire rockets, and things like Iron Dome are essential to, protect civilians from attack by terrorists. And, there's a balanced view that I think holds the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And I think J Street defines that mainstream these days, Ilan. And that you've joined us and part of this. And so I'm thinking that it's my hope is that we can see out of this DNC process perhaps a much more of a coalescing around a statement of principles or something else that defines what we all have in common rather than what divides us.
Yep, I'm 100% in agreement, Jeremy. I think that's exactly where we are. Is very much where we're going. I mean, there are still some touchy conversations and people who feel very strongly about this. I think, and nothing could sort of relieve the pressure as much as ending the war, getting the hostages out, and getting aid in. But yeah, I don't think this is the party that's at its throats right now. The way, the press sometimes really enjoys like stirring the pot. Everything is a disagreement, and Democrats are divided, and yada yada yada. I just don't really feel that right now on this issue set. If anything, I feel a coalescing that's already begun.
Right,
so listen,
and we see that with the Senate vote on the JRDs, where the overwhelming majority of the Democrats in the Senate agreed that it was time to stop saying yes to every sale. And I'll say there's other senators that didn't vote for that, but are in agreement. And I think next time more would vote that way. You see it on the humanitarian issues when you can get 2/3 of the Democrats in the House on a letter in 5 days. You're seeing some real coalescing.
Yeah. So listen, Jeremy, my Uber driver just texted me that they've arrived, and I need to make sure I don't miss a flight back home.
All right.
And also the door is opening behind me, which is not exactly clear why, because I am just randomly in the middle of a synagogue. So for all these reasons, I think the world is telling me it's time to go.
Excellent.
So.
It is great to see you, Ilan. And thank you to everybody for joining us at Word on the Street Live. We do this every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're on next week with Norm Eisen. Really looking forward to that conversation. We've got Randy Weingarten coming up in the future. We've got a few other things lined up. Really looking forward to it, Ilan. Safe travels. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week on Word on the Street.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.